right, I think we'd probably best begin. The person waving at you up here is Larry Cooley. That's me. And I'd like to welcome everybody to this session, which is going to be you're the first ones to hear a great and breaking piece of news. I sound like CNN on this, but for this, you need to use your imaginations just a little bit and imagine an imaginary ribbon right here, an imaginary ribbon. And see these scissors? These scissors are cutting that ribbon. And that ribbon is celebrating the beginning of a new partnership between Rotary and the Carter School, focused on Rotary's efforts to expand peace, something that we think is not only fundamental to the world, but of particular interest to a number of us. And so I'm going to introduce very quickly the topic, and then I'll introduce the panel who's going to be talking about it. Today, we're going to leave a generous amount of time for the rest of you to ask any questions or make any comments that you might want to make. Feel free to drop those in the chat as we go along, or to hang on to them until the question and answer period. We'll try to get to anything that's on your mind. So first, let me see if I can set the stage just a little bit. For those of you who don't come from a Rotary background, let me maybe expand your concept of what Rotary is. Rotary is the largest, or at least the most widely distributed, civil society organization in the world. Let that sink in for a minute. This is 1.5 million members in 34,000 Rotary clubs in virtually every country on the planet. Try to think of another civil society organization that's spread out like that. More than that, Rotary makes a claim, and it makes the claim, I think, with some justification, that peace is in their DNA. Why? Because it's an organization that exists primarily for two things: for fellowship and for service. If you saw the Rotary t-shirts, they often are portrayed this way. They say service above self. And again, try to think of an organization committed to social service without a political agenda, cuts across most ethnic and religious and political lines, and distributed the way it is. And you see why some of us are very excited about the potential role for Rotary in the peace-building space. That said, I think it's fair to say that Rotary is significantly punched below its weight in this arena for a couple of reasons. One is that Rotary is not as good at collective action as it is at action by individual clubs, and most peace issues are beyond the scope of an individual club. A second is that Rotary does not, on purpose, do things that are political or that are likely to be seen as political, because they see it as divisive with Rotary's membership. I say that as a Rotarian as well as somebody who's looked at this. A third thing is that Rotary structure basically gives primacy to what goes on at the club level. So if there's going to be something that attacks a bigger problem with a larger collection of Rotarians, it takes a lot of entrepreneurial energy by Rotarians to try and put it together on the Rotary side. One of the people who noticed this is a late friend of mine named David Fishman, who unfortunately died in January of this year. And David made it his life's work, at least in the last part of his life, to try to help Rotary do better at contributing to peace, because he saw what I see. He saw the potential that lies there for trying to really use Rotary as a vehicle, particularly in conflicts where trust is in deficit, which is most conflicts you can think of. And for those of you who studied this, one of the ways that people talk about social capital is they talk about bonding, bridging, and linking social capital. Bonding is what happens at the community level. It holds together intact communities. Bridging is what happens between communities. Linking is what happens vertically, up and down the system. Rotary's got a structure, at least in principle, that exactly corresponds to that. Individual clubs in localities, mostly municipalities, a structure of districts and zones that allows you to link across, and a vertical structure that allows things to move up and down the system, exactly parallel to what people say about social capital, but again, with the same challenges that I mentioned a moment ago. David was all over this, and he was networking like a banshee in his final months, trying to put together anything he could to make something happen in this regard. Along the way, the thought occurred to him that the Carter School was the secret sauce. in this. And if you could somehow bring them into this conversation, it would both improve the sophistication of the discussion and the action within some Rotary activities, and it would provide potentially an organizational vehicle for doing projects of a sort that didn't easily match the Rotary structure. So he worked like crazy on this. And when he found out that he was dying of metastatic pancreatic cancer, he asked his widow, Mary Clark, and myself to see what we could do to try to carry this forward. So in truth, I've never had anyone make a deathbed wish of me before. In truth, I feel like I'm doing this for David, but along the way, I've gotten pretty committed to it myself. Why the Carter School? Why did David suddenly fall in love with the Carter School? Well, I'll let others speak on behalf of that, but having now had a chance to become part of that, and I'm now on the advisory board for the Carter School, I can see what he saw, which is that there's a broad-based capability and a real depth to peace building that has the potential to add just both substantive value and extra dimensions to things that Rotarians, I think, do out of their hearts, but not necessarily with a strong foundation in what it takes to do successful peace building. That's what David saw. It's what I see now, and it's what I hope the rest of you will see as well. So to bring us up to the present on this, once this happened, when David found out he was dying, he and Mary made a bequest of $250,000 to the Carter School to try to help launch this. Others have contributed subsequently, and that becomes the core for trying to move forward. It's why it's possible to launch the event now. Building on that, there was a study done, commissioned with those funds by the Carter School, that came up with an analysis of the comparative advantage of the school and of Rotary, and tried to talk about what collaboration might look like. Based on that, Al Jubitz, through a foundation that Ray will talk a bit about in a few minutes, funded something called the point of view process, where we've had 3 convenings of 2 days each to try to work out some of the details and the elements of this. And we've now had conversations between Dean Ozerdem and the leadership structure of Rotary about what this might look like in practice as we roll it out. It feels great. I mean, a lot of things have really happened in a relatively short period of time, and a lot of people are very enthusiastic about it. And there remain a lot of unfilled pieces in this, a lot of questions that need to be worked out. Today's launch is the beginning of that process. So we're hoping you'll join us in trying to spell this out in greater detail. It would be misrepresenting the situation to say we know the answers to all the operational questions. So I'll introduce now the panel. You couldn't pick a better one for this. Charles Davidson is going to speak next, and he's the inaugural director of this partnership. And in addition, on the Carter School faculty, is the director of the Carter School Center for Political Leadership, or the Academy for Political Leadership. After Charles will come, assuming we can work out our technical problems, Patricia Schaefer, who's the executive director of New Gen Peace Builders. And the reason I'm particularly keen to have Patricia talk to us is 2 of the activities that we're looking at as strong potential for early activities under the partnership. She's actually been the moving force behind. One, and the one she's going to talk about, is in Lebanon, and there's another in South Sudan. Then we're going to hear from Rebecca Kroll. Rebecca's on the staff of Rotary International, and she's going to give us a little bit of the perspective from the viewpoint of Rotary. What does this mean? How does it fit into other things that are going on? And that's going to be followed by Ray Matsumiya, who's director of Rotary engagement for the Jubitz Family Foundation, which, as I mentioned before, has funded these point of view activities and has been very involved in peace activities by Rotary in a host of different ways. And finally, we're going to have Dean Ozerdem talk about this from the Carter School's perspective. That sounds like a lot, but we're each going to be brief, and we're going to save the last 30 minutes for discussion with the rest of you. So without further ado, let me pass on to Charles. Charles, you can skip the slide I was going to use and just go straight to yours.
All right. Thank you so much, Larry. Man, what an honor and a privilege it is to be in front of such a wonderful crowd here. I can't believe that the day has finally arrived where we've started speaking about this publicly. I wanted to begin a little bit just talking about myself for a minute and a half to kind of orient you toward where I've been and I think why I was chosen to help lead this. And then we'll go through this program from the Carter School perspective and what we're hoping to both integrate and accomplish over the course of the next year and beyond. And then I'll turn it over to the next speaker. I'm going to do it all in 11 and a half minutes, so it's going to be swift. Like Larry said, I'm Dr. Charles Davidson. I'm a 2019 alumni of what was the School for Conflict Analysis and Resolution at George Mason. I was the last member of that cohort before it became the Carter School. Before that, when I was really young, 20, 21 years old, I went to my mentor at the time, and I said, I think I want to be in peace building. And he said, what do you know about peace building? And I said, I don't know anything about peace building. He's like, yeah, exactly. So you need to leave. I was in Arkansas at the time, and you need to not come back until you do before you try to accomplish anything. And so for about 5 years as a young man, I just traveled around the world to the various conflict-affected nations at the time when I could gather up enough money for a plane ticket, and just went and watched and listened and learned at other peace builders trying to do these things. And I learned a lot about what both internationals do well and what they do poorly, and what locals do well, and some of the pitfalls that they can run into. And as a result, I developed this incredible passion for this international local partnership in peace building, and then got into my dream PhD program at the Carter School and finished up in 2019, around the time that Dean Ozerdem took the helm here at the school. As Larry said, I'm now the leader of the Political Leadership Academy, which has been running since, I guess it's been 2020. And then I was also tapped to lead the locally led peace building initiative at the Carter School, which this program is kind of coming up underneath my my directorship in that capacity. So I've already been incredibly focused on locally led peace. And when Dean Ozerdem asked me to lead this, he asked it as though I would say no. like it was an actual question. I'm like, you're handing me my dream job. You're saying I could get paid to do this. Like, this is amazing. So I am just thrilled to be at the in this position at the Carter School. So I'll start my PowerPoint slide here. We've only got 4, and I don't even think we're going to show Larry's. So it's like we're already down to 3. Let's see here. Can everybody see my PowerPoint? Great. But here's the real, now can everybody see my PowerPoint? Awesome. Okay, so from the Carter School perspective, we are looking at this initiative as an equal opportunity for both organizations. We are incredibly humbled by the fact that like there's 1.4 million people in the Rotary Club. Like, that's a fact I didn't learn until just like maybe a few weeks ago, well into this initiative. I was telling people, I'm like, yeah, I think the Rotary Club's got like tens of thousands of people. No. And so I was already under the impression that this club had a worldwide impact. But when I really learned the extent of the connections that the Rotary Club has, I just got really starry-eyed. Like what an incredible opportunity to be able to partner with such a distinctive institution. And then we at the Carter School also recognize ourselves as being just excellent in leading the field at the intersection of peace and conflict resolution education. And the word that keeps coming back in every conversation that I've had with Rotary Club members is enhance. We want to enhance one another's capacities and grow in efficacy for the sake of peace building around the world and at home. For me personally, before I get into these 5 pillars of approach, the things that I've learned in my past and what has already designed my ethos of approach in effective peace building, I think also lends itself well to what Rotary has in mind. And I have met with no fewer than, I think, 20 Rotarians in the past 2 weeks, just running stuff by them and listening to what they have to say, hearing out their vision and how we can scope and mold this as we go into our final planning session at the end of this month. But first and foremost is locally led and locally evaluated. The idea is that if we as outsiders come in thinking we have all the answers, we have already failed. And so leading with humility, leading with listening, but then leading also with the connections, the ideas that Rotarians have to make this a true Rotary Club initiative is going to be what the passion that I'm leading with. I'm also really committed to efficient peace building. I think that one of the incredible lessons that I learned in my tenure as a practitioner and now as a scholar is the sheer amount of waste that goes into peace building around the world. The work that we are winding down now in the South Kivu province of the Congo really demonstrated the ability for a peace building program to be run at a fraction of the cost. Some equal capacity programs we ran for 5% of their costs. So these millions of dollar projects is not something I'm super interested in, because I think that creativity leads to efficiency, and money should be used as a tool, not as the center of the program. And so my hope is to develop a culture of fiscally efficient peace building among clubs around the world. And then finally is output versus outcome. And this is something I'm finding that Rotarians are especially passionate about. But those are that's kind of the rhetoric that we're putting to it. And that is, there is a difference between producing programming around the world and building peace. A lot of times we will lead with, we pulled this thing off. We had a soccer match, or we dug a well, or there was a picnic among warring tribes or something like that, right? And that's great. Like these good intentions are what are needed to build peace, but they are not peace. It is a program. And so I want to definitely, throughout this process, delineate between programming and peace and not intertwine those two. When real peace is being observed, we will then lead the way in monitoring, evaluating the actual efficacy of the programming, which I'll talk about. So getting to the main activities here, there are 2 main activities and 3 ancillary supporting activities that have been designed around this initiative thus far in the first point of view, the first 2 point of view meetings where people from all over the country have gathered to design this. Number 1, the creation of an incubator/accelerator for the Rotary Charter School Peace projects. This is exactly what it sounds like, where we will be partnering with Rotarians around the world who have ideas for peace building, who maybe they've already started them, or maybe it's a spark and they want to incubate the process. The hope is to partner our incredibly talented faculty at the Charter School with the Rotary clubs around the world who have these ideas to, again, enhance the process in both directions. The hope is that when we match this world-class scholarship that we have at the Charter School with these worldwide present clubs, that we can start to not only build peace in different dynamic areas, but we can start to develop something called modalities, where we build models of approach. We build models of peace building that we can then hopefully examine, evaluate, adjust, and then reproduce in another area. And as we build this bank of modalities, we will start to write, publish, and evaluate about it, which again, I'll speak about on the next slide. Again, going back to this idea of outcome, in order to incubate ideas, in order to accelerate existing ideas of peace projects around the world, we really want to get to the place where the Rotary Club can, what Larry talked about, lean into that DNA of peace, where they can actually make observable demonstrations and measurable demonstrations of peace being built around the world as a result of the Rotary Club's passion, DNA, and presence in peace building. The second main activity, one I am equally as passionate about, is the development of peace building and conflict prevention education and capacity building courses and trainings for Rotary Club members. So something that I'm learning, I am the father of a 5-month-old daughter. She's my very first one. I am like the happiest guy I have ever been, and it has rearranged the way that I feel about my life and my priorities. And all of a sudden, I've got this image now of what it means to pass on knowledge to the next generation in a way that I've never seen that before. And it surprises me that I didn't put a picture of my daughter in this slideshow, because I've been doing that a lot lately. But in that, and as I've gotten older, what I've learned is that I might have been privileged enough to build peace around the world, to work with local actors in I think I've been to 68 different countries, not all for peace, but if we, as peace experts, as peace actors, as peace scholars, do not work to reproduce our skills, capabilities, they die with us. And so I am incredibly passionate about educating the next generation of peace builders. That's why when people ask me, what's the last thing you would give up in your career? It would be teaching. That's the last thing I would give up. I love teaching. I love enhancing the capabilities of the next generation of peace builders. And so that's where I'm starting with this pillar. But the idea will be to produce peace building education for Rotary members around the world, especially focusing on the leadership at Rotary International and the district governors, so that the taught can become the teachers. Getting to the place where this club that is so incredibly strong can become stronger in that peace building DNA as they start to get a handle on the basics of peace building scholarship, and we can all become more fluent in what we mean and kind of standardize, normativize the language that we're using. What is it we mean when we say peace? And how are we getting there together? And so we want to avail peace building education to the Rotary Club all over the place, but we also want to start right here at home. So that's pillar number 2. So those are the main activities. Now we have 3 supporting activities that exist within our collaborative proposal thus far. The first one is research to action, and this is kind of defining our place at the nexus of peace building praxis. So the intersection of scholarship and applied practice is known as praxis. And it is this continual cycle of learning things through research and teaching and putting them into effect in the field, and then gathering excellent data from the field and putting it back into the learning process. So the only way we become better peace builders is by humbly accepting reflective practice and outstanding models of monitoring and evaluation that can isolate the actual affect of the programming to say, did it make a difference or did it not? And that was something that I was speaking to Patricia about when we were speaking about, what is the value add from the Carter School? Among many things is we are really good at learning whether or not our efforts made a difference. Ask any quantitative specialist in this building about that, and you'll probably have to buy them lunch because it's going to be a while. But we're really, really good at designing models of efficacy and finding out, did this work or did it not? And how can successes and failures inform future programming? So getting into this cycle of reflective practice and what's known as reflexivity in changing your actions upon what you've learned. This also contributes to the development of those modalities I spoke about, where we produce models that worked in one place and see if they'll work in another. All of that will then go into number 4 here, Rotary Better Evidence Project Hub. The Better Evidence Project is a super cool project that we have here at the Carter School, where we're building out an online database of peace and conflict resolution projects from all over the world, and making accessible the characteristics of those programs for future peace builders to be able to access and find out what exactly was attempted inside of what conflict environment, and what were the outcomes and why, so that people aren't constantly reinventing the wheel, and we all don't have to learn the hard way in ways that everyone else has learned. We can simply say, here are the lessons that were learned. Perhaps I want to go to Mogadishu in Somalia. Well, I'm going to open up the Better Evidence Project and find out a list of peace building programs that have been done in Mogadishu, and then say, what exactly happened, what were the outcomes, and how could I do it better? And we're designing it not for scholars only, but it's something that's accessible to the laity. So peace building practitioners, locals, everybody can log in and be able to read this stuff without having a degree in conflict resolution. What we would love to do is have a Rotary Club section of the Better Evidence Project so that Rotarians can log in and see specifically what it is the Rotary Club has done. So again, for the same reasons, they're not inventing the wheel and get to learn lessons the easy way, not the hard way. Admittedly, one of the things I'm incredibly excited about is number 5, the Salon for Peace. I'm learning this word, by the way. I was meeting with Mr. Hiller, who's a part of this project from the Jubitz Foundation. And we were kind of joking about the word salon being something that every European will understand when you say it, but some Americans will be like, what do you mean when you say salon? Right. But last night I was in a meeting and I heard an American saying salon, and I interrupted her and said, what did you mean when you said that? And she defined exactly what it is that we're using this word for. And that is an intimate setting that brings people together under the roof of a home or a club, where a group of highly interested people get to learn in a really direct way about ideas related to peace building and how they might be networked, expanded, and fundraised for. Basically, these will be events for people that really want to dive into a specific area, and will be facilitated in such a way that it brings together networking opportunities in a really interpersonal way. It's not a conference, it's not a meeting, it's a salon. And I'm growing to really love that word, and I'm hoping one day we can hold a salon for peace in my house. But that's that. I'm sure I've taken way more time than I was allotted. I do hope this has been informative. This is where we're at. We do have one more planning session at Point of View at the end of this month. So this is not yet totally solid, but we do feel as a team that this is probably where we're going to land with a few adjustments. So I do hope you've enjoyed this, and I'm going to pass it on now back to Larry. Thank you. Larry, you are muted.
Sorry, I'm going to immediately pass it on to Patricia to, if you would, Patricia, share with us a little bit about the Lebanon example, which is not only exciting in its own right, but I think a really valuable illustration of what kinds of things this accelerator could take on.
My pleasure. Well, first of all, greetings, everyone. I am here in Emeritus, Georgia. And Emeritus, Georgia is where Georgia Southwestern University is. And I'm presenting 3 times today. But Emeritus, Georgia is where President Jimmy Carter is from. And so I'm really struck by the beautiful serendipity that I'm here in these presentations today here, while from the Carter School and with the connection with Rotary, and by the way, where I'm speaking today, the events are sponsored by Rotary. So I'm very happy to share this serendipity and have a chance to tell you a quick story about Lebanon, first and foremost. It's a story that's a story really about Rotary in action, and what happens when Rotary in action meets other incredible partners, the Carter School being the primary example we're talking about today. But I want to note that I'm the Senior Fellow for Peace Education at the Alliance for Peacebuilding. I am the Executive Director of New Gen Peace Builders. I'm a Rotary Peace Fellow. I'm a Rotarian. I'm a Rotary Positive Peace Activator. And I was a Rotary Ambassador some years ago, right out of grad school, and was sent to Cairo, Egypt. So my whole journey in this matter begins in the Middle East, and I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. The story goes like this. I have had the good fortune to certify 8,000 young peace builders around the world between the ages of 14 and 29. I have done that in my roles that I just described to you, but I've been able to do that because Rotarians said when I was a Rotary Peace Fellow, why can't we take all of the knowledge and resources and energy and community-based wisdom that we have working with young people and doing projects at the local level and 100 years of peace building experience or dedication to peace, and bring that to the local level with regularity in a scaled way, and have age groups far and wide begin to be able to access these tools that would normally be the privilege of Rotary Peace Fellows. That led to many different projects, but one project that is central in my mind is a project that was done in Lebanon that ran between 2019 and 2022. But it was an idea, it was a germ of an idea in 2017 from Rotarians in Lebanon and Tennessee, of all places. And they said, we have never had a program like this in Lebanon. Let's bring this peace education opportunity that's been in all these other places to Lebanon. So we thought it would happen earlier than 2019, but you know what happened. There was a Beirut port explosion. There was challenges to the economy in Lebanon. We all experienced COVID-19, and yet Rotarians persisted. And with a $100,000 grant, we introduced it, I'll call it the incubator program, with university students across Lebanon from 11 different universities. And we took them through a really intensive 6 days of workshops on peace education, training, and mentoring over several months, principles of conflict management, and importantly, the identification of how you actually do projects in your community. And then they were supported to do 6 projects in their community, one of which became an incubator project with the World Food Program, because the project was about the sudden lack of food security in Lebanon, with 70% of the population suddenly having a hard time finding food. And the recognition that there were still restaurants operating and food was going to waste. So the project was to bring these two things together, but in a community where there had been a history of intersect and interreligious violence. So you can see this is a peace building project around food. So the World Food Program liked that very much and said, hey, let's take that idea and incubate it. Now, the program ended and some lovely things have happened after. There's a Rotary Peace Fellow candidate who's being considered. Some of the projects have lived on. The first Impact Club from Rotarians ever from New Gen Peace Builders alum is now up and operating in Lebanon. But people sort of looked around and said, what next? And so for over a year, we've been looking at what next. A team of about 15 people have done interviews with over 100 people in the Middle East, in the United States, in Lebanon in particular, all kinds of experts. We have team members who have backgrounds with McKinsey Consulting. We have team members who have backgrounds with Abercon, which is the leadership development arm of McKinsey. We have Rotary Peace Fellows on the team. We have Rotarians on the team. So we spent a year looking at, well, what is the what next? And the aha is that there, and I loved what Charles said about developing new theories or modalities. There's a gap in our field that there really isn't a lot of work or evidence that's been done around what I'll call integral peace leadership. And Charles alluded to this. Often things that get funded in our world are you fund a peace project, like a conversation, peace like a conversation, or an activity for a day, or a conference, or you fund a project, or you may fund a little program, or you may invest in people like the 1,500 Rotary Peace Fellows in the world. But there is nothing out there in a consistent way that integrates people, project, program, peace, and does it in ways that are in places in the world that have faced a significant amount of recent conflict and turbulence, which is where Lebanon is and the region itself. So we've been working on that. And so some people might say, well, you know, you're so far along. Isn't that amazing? Keep going. No. The real keep going can happen in a setting where Rotary and, you know, this team I've mentioned, and the Carter School with all its expertise intersect. And here's what I see. The Carter School has, you know, vast experience in the arena, obviously, issues more degrees and fellowships in the world than any other school, has experience in various regions around the world, has worked on projects themselves, but most importantly, brings strategic thinking, academic insight, and validation, the ability to measure. Rotary has, you know, the 1.4 million members around the world, all these clubs, Rotarians like the ones who worked with us in Lebanon to make this happen, to help make it happen in country. So you put these things together. And so the Lebanon project, which we hope with, you know, support and conversation will launch in the middle of 2024, is the what next. And the what next is just a great illustration, I think. And I think that's why we're using it as a model of how does someone start with an idea and a need, a project gets incubated or a program gets incubated, then you start to create partnerships that can grow that idea, make it stronger, and replicate it in places far and wide. So my friend Rebecca Krall was a big promoter of the Lebanon project in the first place, and she speaks beautifully about think locally, then kind of spread from locally, then think regionally, then think about the world. And so I think this is an opportunity of great partners, great resources to do just that. Thank you.
Thank you. That was perfect. And it was exactly the segue to Rebecca Kroll, your friend and now our friend. And I wonder, Rebecca, if you could pick up the storyline that Patricia was starting us on and put this in the larger context of Rotary International's efforts in peace building.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, everyone. I'm just really thrilled to be here. I have these beautiful talking points, and now I've scribbled all over them because I've had so many new ideas from my colleagues speaking. But I have been working, so I work as the area focus manager for peace building and conflict prevention at Rotary International. So that's at the international level. I think I have the unenviable job of working in peace building in every single context and every single geography and language across the globe, which has been absolutely fascinating, but of course challenging given some of the examples that people have given here. But I wanted to start off, and I will get to this idea of local, regional, and global, because that is absolutely part of what we do. But I just wanted to start off by saying that for the last year, I would say, I have felt this just incredible momentum within our organization to work not only to grow, but to really improve. So I think we've heard the word enhance, to really enhance the work that we're doing within peace building and conflict prevention within Rotary. Larry touched on this, but peace building is in our DNA. We talk about this all the time. We say this a lot. It's the ethos of the organization, and that's absolutely true. We have 25 years of investment in peace fellowships, of which Patricia is one of our peace fellows, scholarships, programs, but we have only been investing in community-led peace building for 10 years. And that's something that shifted in 2014 when we opened up our grant model to this type of work. So it's a really important point to start to think about and say, okay, peace has been a part of Rotary, but this shift to actually asking our members to take these ideas and these theories and put it into action, that is something that is very new for the organization. I won't lie, it's been a challenge. Again, what Charles was saying is like, how do we define peace? How does, every Rotary member, 1.2 million of them, think about peace, and how do we come to a collective understanding to at least allow us to move forward? So that said, I feel like this is just an incredibly exciting time. And I also feel that it lines up with an incredibly challenging time globally. I don't think anyone needs reminding of how complicated things feel right now on the individual level, at the community level. And we really need to start, and we've said this a lot, but our solutions need to change. They need to adjust to the global challenges that we see. They need to be systemic, they need to be durable, and they need to be innovative. And I think that I can argue that we can be innovative even with a 100-year-old organization, which might seem counterintuitive, but I think that that's actually, that's possible. So as Charles was saying, we need those approaches to conflict that are a partnership between the international and the local. I would probably emphasize more on the local and not just particular people from the local. Another partnership that Rotary has been engaging in for the last 7 years is a partnership with the Institute for Economics and Peace that focuses on this idea of positive peace, but really looks at systemic solutions to peace. So that is another, and I'm trying not to repeat what other people have said, but that is another area that I think is really important. So when we look at this local international partnership, when we look at the local, Rotary represents so many different pieces of a community or a nation or a region that bringing those different pieces together can have a much more sustainable outcome, because we hope to engage all different aspects of society, not just certain pieces. So that is something that I hope that we can build off of. Aside from the Carter School partnership, although I'm now looking at this partnership as an integral piece of where we want to move this portfolio within Rotary. But what we are looking at is indeed enhancing first the capacity and the understanding and the skills of Rotary members. moving from that ethos and that belief in peace to being able to implement programs that are evidence-based and can really make a difference. So with that work, we talk a lot about this connection of dots in the ecosystem of peace. So that's also something that we hope to do through the partnership with IEP. We've seeded, I talk about seeding these regional networks that we now have in 6 areas globally. So working with those regional networks, bringing in Carter to really understand like what is the potential within Rotary to move some of these things forward. So I could not be happier about the work that we have in front of us. I think that it is going to really bring us to the next level. So we've, even in 10 years, we've had a ton of progress, and now we're ready to make the next step. And we have been given this gift. I really do, going back to what Larry said, David Fishman really kind of gave the seed to us, to use that again, and we have been able to take that, and I'm really excited to make something really beautiful out of this. And one thing I see on my notes that I did not cover that I did want to say, because I think it's really important, and Al might talk about this a little bit more, is that, going back to the global situation we find ourselves in, we need to move away from niche expert organizations, which is, they're great, they have a role, but we need to widen both the understanding and the application of peace building to volunteer organizations, citizen-led initiatives. And I hope that this partnership can show Rotary how we can do that, but also apply models that we are then able to share across our communities, because it's not just Rotary that's going to actually make a difference. It's Rotary and Carter and everyone working together to make this culture of peace a reality. That is something that is done every day in our lives over and over again. So with that, I will stop and I will hand it back over to Ray.
Thank you, Rebecca. Ray, there's probably nobody I can think of who's worked as tirelessly on this issue as Al Jubitz. I would think if he were on the line, he would probably recount to us some of his frustrations as well as some of his joys in doing that. But if there's anyone who's stubbed his toe in every corner of this issue, he would probably be our guy on this. And nevertheless, he carries on undaunted on this, not least, and I would say very importantly, having made the decision to appoint you to be head of Rotary engagement for his foundation. And I'm wondering, to the extent you can channel him, but also speak for yourself, what do you think about all this in terms of where we are now and where we might go next?
Well, I can tell you that all of us at the Davidson Family Foundation are extremely excited about this. I'm personally excited because it brings together 2 of my worlds. I'm a Rotarian. I'm a former president of one of the clubs, but I'm also a conflict resolution practitioner. I'm mostly working in the area that Patricia does in the Middle East and North Africa. So this is something that brings together 2 of these things that I really care about. I think I'm most excited because there's such tremendous potential for Rotary in peace building. And Rotary is the organization that helped nearly eradicate polio. So if the same power can be harnessed towards peace building, I really think the sky's the limit. And I think that's why my foundation is so excited about this collaboration. So just a little background on the Jubitz Family Foundation. Al Jubitz is the founder of this foundation. He's been a longtime Rotarian. He's really been one of the pioneers in trying to push Rotary towards more of a peace building role in what we do. I think I saw in the chat that someone mentioned the Rotary Action Group for Peace. We helped found that about 10 years ago. We helped establish some of the first conferences exclusively devoted for peace in the Rotary ecosystem. So we've been working for a long time to help enhance Rotary's peace building activities. One of the things we're most excited about is that in the most recent convention, for those of you that don't know, the Rotary Convention is like the pivotal event in the Rotary calendar. This convention has 20 to 40,000 attendees every year. So at this convention, we established something called the Peace Park. It was a large peace exhibit that really highlighted the work of peace builders in Rotary. And we really didn't know what the reception was going to be like. But I can tell you that during the 4 days that I was there, I never saw such enthusiasm for peace among Rotarians, just on the ground. And I know that there's a lot of momentum on an institutional level that Rebecca talked about, but there's such a tremendous energy among Rotarians themselves to engage more in peace. I think it's exactly because of the factors that Rebecca and others talked about. We are living in very uncertain and dangerous times. And I think Rotarians understand that, they want to do something about it, and they also see how that Rotary can be a tremendous organization that can help make that happen. So I just see like a real change in Rotary that we are experiencing right now. And that's why this collaboration really comes at the right time, at the right place, with the right people. Is that I feel like the world is changing. Rotarians want to get more involved, and I know that there have been many problems in the past. But I think the macro circumstances are changing, and I think Rotary is also going to change. And for this, my own academic background is in conflict resolution, and I know that there's really few institutions that are as qualified to help Rotary guide through this new environment than the Carter School. And I think that's why we're so excited. And so you can really count on our support to take this further on. Like I said before, we are in the right time in history for this collaboration to happen. So thank you.
Thank you. Alp, I couldn't imagine you being teed up any better than that. We'd like to hear a little bit what this looks like from your shoes.
Thank you, Larry, and thank you very much, everyone. Yes, I am indeed so excited about this initiative as the Dean of the Carter School, and what we just heard from my fellow panelists about what this partnership is about and what it could achieve and why it is important. I think they've done the job, so my job is quite easy, perhaps just to highlight a few things, and then we can move to our Q&A. There are three main things that I want to highlight. I think the first one on the question of why this partnership, not much to add. Thanks to you, Larry, and all my fellow panelists. I think you said what needs to be said on this matter, but I really like this definition of creating a new ecosystem for partnership between two distinctive institutions, for them to join up their efforts and working together for greater impact for peace. And in that, I think the possibility of scalability, scaling up our efforts of peace building and conflict prevention globally, that is just such an exciting trajectory. And with that, this is not only important for the present time, but also what's coming up in the future. With all the geopolitical shifts and the geopolitical conflicts, and with the climate change, with the environmental degradation, with the mass displacement challenges we are facing, so much volatility and also uncertainty. And on top of that, you have this rapid change with technology, with the application of AI and big data and everything. So the world is changing so much, right? So I think times like this, my fellow panelists mentioned this, I think times like this, organizations like the Rotary and the Carter School, for them to coming together is really significant. So this is really the critical moment in our history of humanity, and by working together, I think we'll be able to do something significant here. So that's number one, and number two is related to that, and that's very much around our collaboration. So Charles describe that collaboration, and that's the way we conceptualize the whole thing, and that's the starting point though. This is really kind of like the first step, because what really excites me even more is what is yet to come, because this is going to be a dynamic process with Rotary's existing peace infrastructure, with its peace centers, peace fellows, and the wide range of work related to conflict prevention and peace building undertaken at the club level. I think once we start to map that and bring them together as part of this collaboration, that part is really going to achieve something quite amazing, right? So what is yet to come, I think Rebecca's point makes me really excited about this whole initiative. And hence, we have that flexibility. So this is not done deal in the sense that here it is, the collaboration, that's what we are going to do next 5 years. We'll be looking at this collaboration and its content in a very much a continuous manner, and just to make sure that we are apt with the time and the challenges, right? And the importance of local. So once we start to engage with Rotary clubs in different localities, I think the feedback from them will be so important, right? So the tailor-made aspect, the locally led peacemaking, whatever definition you want to use, right? This is a learning practice. This is about, engaging people on the front line doing the peace work. And in this case, our targeted group is Rotary clubs and Rotarians, right? So this is a two-way learning and two-way of practice. And we see the Carter School's role as a facilitator in this, making that connections between the dots, making the connections between the existing programs and also what we are intending to do, right? So I don't like silos. I don't like rigid structures, because the reality we are facing globally with global challenges really don't have any appetite with that kind of like the prudential standpoint that this is who I am and this is what I do, right? Yes, we work with principles and values, but I think within that flexibility will be really important, being able to adapt to the conditions that we'll be facing. So that is what's yet to come, and it's really exciting. And my final point is about the modality. So my colleagues mentioned that, and I just want to re-emphasize that and its significance. So individual projects and their outputs are important, and I love it. Any contribution to global peace, I would grab them with both hands, right? But we really need to create modalities so that we don't need to start every time from scratch. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. So the whole incubation and acceleration idea with the projects primarily is about modalities, so that we can actually set the evidence for what works in what conditions, with what resources, with through what type of partnerships, so that that could be really meaningful for Rotarians and Rotary clubs, and generating networks of Rotary clubs working together, and generating networks of Rotarians, in localities, in the local context, in the regional context, and in the international context. The modality part is going to be also really important, not only for this partnership, but in the largest sense possible. So I'm kind of thinking, what is the role of academia in responding to global challenges? So I think we all agree that we are not going to be able to respond to them effectively just from our singular positions, right? So the modality of partnership, I think, is really important. So in this case, Carter School working with Rotary, but imagine academic institutions working with other actors in civil society, in the private sector. The modality of mobilizing networks. I think this is the kind of like the key point here. And I think with that, the modality for me, like two levels. In terms of this partnership between Rotary and Carter School around peace projects and with other activities that we are aiming for, but also that bigger picture of what role is there for academia for responding to global challenges. So all in all, I think, as my fellow panelists said, this is an important date. We'll soon launch the program officially once we've done our third point of view meeting next week. because we would like to get the feedback from our greater community there. But pretty much, I think there will be so many exciting things emerging from this initiative. I mean, just you heard from Patricia and her possible initiative in Lebanon. I mean, that could be transformative, and that's only one of the examples. We already got a number of potential projects like that in mind. But ultimately, though, we need to speak to Rotarians. I think their input will be really significant in shaping all this. So I think, Larry, that's how much I want to say at this stage. I don't want to take too much of time from our Q&A, and I think I'm just right in time, so you should congratulate me on this. This doesn't happen very often.
Then I double congratulate you.
Thank you very much.
I want to, just for the people who are new to this, I want to clarify a couple of details that may help them to figure out how to engage or how to grab onto this. The first is a very operational one, which is in trying to figure out how to constitute this partnership. One of the things that was decided early on was that there needed to be something that acted in effect as a secretariat for the partnership. And that secretariat is in the person of Charles right now. And it's located inside the Carter School, but it definitely is intended to be responsive to both parties, of course, to the Carter School, but even more to what the initiatives are on the Rotary side on this. So part of what needs to be established is a pathway of communications between Rotarians and this new entity, I'll call it an entity for this purpose, that helps these projects and these education opportunities and the other ancillary activities Charles was talking about really find concrete meaning. And so if any of you have ideas, thoughts, or actual propositions to put forward, I would say from this moment on, the right place to direct those is to Charles. There's also a web page that the Carter School has put up on this. And if you scroll back up in the chat, you'll find a link to that Maria placed in the chat earlier on. So if you want to follow this, there's not much on that web page yet, but there's going to be. So if you want to find a way to connect, there's a good way to do it and to stay connected with what we're doing. A couple more concrete features of this. As the Dean just mentioned, we're going to be meeting again next week in the third of these 3 two-day planning sessions to try and work out some of these details. But it will be the case that even after that, what we intend during the first year of operations is a lot of experimentation. It's very clear that exactly how this can best support the initiatives of Rotarians and Rotary clubs remains a work in progress. I know, for example, and I'm going to ask you, Rebecca, to speak about this in a second. Rebecca has an idea in her head that's more than a fiction, but it's not yet a full reality around regional networks and how this might relate to regional networks. I've, in the course of helping to mobilize this, run across a number of initiatives within Rotary that are already focused on peace initiatives, and how this links to those is a work in progress. A couple of you on the call I know represent some of those activities. Charles and I are going to be speaking to another group that's organized out of the regional office in Denver later this month, or in October, on the same topic. And I'm beginning to realize these are just 2 of many on this. So trying to figure out how not to lose ourselves in the thicket, but how to effectively connect to these various things is going to be something for which we would benefit from all the help that any of you can give us. Rebecca, if you wouldn't mind, I know it's just one specific detail, but I think this idea of regional networks is important enough to ask you to say another word or 2 on it, if you would.
Sure. So I talked briefly about it in my earlier comments, but through our work with the Institute for Economics and Peace, we have seeded or set up regional networks in 6 areas. So that's North America, South America, Europe, Asia, and then 1 in East Africa and 1 in West Africa. So when we say region, some of these regions are really big. So at some point, we're probably going to need to really build them up in the sense that we actually have more people to make the regional work smaller. But I'll talk about West Africa because that's the most recent and probably the most active regional network. So we have members from a number of different countries in French-speaking and English-speaking West Africa. They are comprised of Rotary members, Rotary Peace Fellows, and then peace builders at the community level. So what the goal of working with these networks are, and it has primarily up until now been part of this positive peace work, and I've answered a question and put a link in the chat if you want to reference that. So it's been started through that, that framework. And we have different members doing different work. We have some of the members collaborating, but the idea is that we get away from a single club project. We get away from a single district project. And we, at the very minimum, we have communication and understanding about what other clubs are doing and what they're interested in. And in the best case scenario, you have everyone feeding up into a regional peace building plan, which is what we're going to be working on next month when we bring representatives from all the regional networks to Nepal for a 3-day summit.
Thanks.
So that is where we hope for the work to go. The positive peace framework is excellent. It's a very theoretical framework. And I think what is exciting about this partnership is that we can actually put meat on the bone, so to speak. We can look at other skills that we need, other capacities we need to move this forward that can fit within that framework. So I'll stop there, but it is a tangible and exciting opportunity.
One more thing before you go. On the, say just a word about the peace activators.
Sure. So the peace activators are essentially the networks. They're the people, they have gone through both an online and an in-person training. Well, 2 of them were trained during COVID, so they were purely online. But they have been trained both in the positive peace framework, so what that means, and that's briefly like 8 pillars that the Institute has determined to be most crucial for a sustained peace within different contexts, which can be applied both very small in a very small context up to, you know, national government. So they've been trained in that framework, but then also putting that into action. So we call it positive peace in action, which then opens up the activators to multiple different applications of the positive peace framework. But also, most importantly, what they are tasked with is engaging Rotary clubs. So whether they're a Rotary member or a non-Rotary member, we want them to be going out and speaking to and collaborating with Rotary clubs to teach them about this and then inspire them to get involved.
Thanks. That's exactly what I was hoping you would say. Let me open this up now for any questions or comments that people might have. I'd like to maybe first ask those of you who are on the phone who are coming from the Rotary side of the conversation. If there's anything you heard that either excites you or concerns you, this would be a good time to say it, because we're very much in a learning mode as we try to launch this activity. We're few, so you can come off mute and come on camera if you've got something you'd be willing to say.
Please do.
Being shy is not a Rotary characteristic.
Or you applaud us for having such a great plan to change the world. That's also
that's right. All right. Well, while you convince yourselves to do that, I'm going to, Rich, turn for just a second to you, if you don't mind. I mean, you've been pretty much part of this from the beginning, maybe more than even before the beginning. And this, I wonder if you'd reflect for a second on where you think we are and what you think is going to be most challenging going forward.
Well, this is an exciting time, and you've all done a very good job in saying why. I guess, you know, as I'm listening to you talk and listening to the discussion of peace building, I'm also thinking that this is going to be a really challenging and interesting project for us all, because if we're honest about our profession and our school, I think we have to say that we are a young profession. We're a young school, and there are all sorts of issues that, although we like to say we know, we have the answers, we all have more questions than answers. So, in one of the wonderful things about this partnership, I think, for our school, is going to be that being in contact with people who are really interested in peace, in many countries and in many people from many walks of life, we're going to be dealing with reality, if you like, social reality, in a way that many academic institutions don't really get to do. And so how we define peace and how we make it work in different localities and under different circumstances is going to be a real challenge for us, as well as we're not just appearing as the experts here, we're also appearing as the learners. And so I think, for example, that one of the things that concerns a number of us, we've been writing about it and talking about it and trying to practice it for some time, is my own hobby horse, I guess, but it's what you do about conflict in the world when the conflict is being produced by systems that are producing it. When the conflict is not just a result of people who misunderstand each other, and also not just a result of people who are nasty towards each other or aggressive towards each other, but rather conflicts that seem to grow out of systems that we really don't understand that well, that we're trying to learn to understand, so we can figure out how to fix the system to make it less conflict ridden. Well, that's a joint enterprise. I think it's something that we're studying and trying to get better at, and something that the Rotarians are going to be able to also study and get better at, and we're going to help each other deal with questions like that. So I think the Carter School is a wonderful place, but there are a hell of a lot of questions that we haven't answered yet, and this is going to be an opportunity for us to work together on finding those answers.
Thanks for that. I'll just offer an editorial comment of my own on this. A lot of, if you ask me what my discipline is, what my field is, I'd call it large system change. And one of the things that I often say about that is that the coalitions that got you where you are, got you where you are. And so it's almost certainly going to require something additional to that to get you where you need to be on this. And that almost always involves what you might call strange bedfellows, which are people that you did not think of as your natural colleagues in trying to pursue it. It means somehow making common cause with people who either didn't know they shared your problem or you didn't know they shared your interests on this. And it's an active and aggressive action on somebody's part to try and do this. And one of the things that I'm encouraged by, but also I think is going to be a challenge on this, is how entrepreneurial Rotarians, individual Rotarians, things going. Because the system doesn't instruct them to do an activity. People have to decide to want to do an activity and then garner enough momentum to link to other individuals, maybe beginning with other Rotarians, but then to these larger systems. And I think those of us who are coming from outside, I'll now call myself inside, but I'll put the Carter School initially as coming from outside on this. I think really need to help encourage that and support it in every way we possibly can, because it's a heavy lift we're asking people to do. I mean, it's not their job. Nobody's paying them for it. Nobody's even authorizing them to do it. They just have to see a problem and decide to organize to make something happen. And I think as I look at this, it's both the most exciting and the most challenging piece of it, in that you're talking about systems and structures. Well, we're not coming from a system that has a mandate to fix the problem. It's a self-appointed role that we're taking on. And how do we basically get people who want to believe in this and then bring them together in a way that makes that happen? I mean, when Patricia told the story about Lebanon, implicit in that, but she was very humble about it, is the role she personally played in pulling a lot of these things together. And I think it's going to be true in each one of these cases. We're going to have to find and encourage heroes who are willing to reach beyond their mandate to try and make things happen. And I hope we'll find creative ways to do just that. Al?
Thank you, Larry. Rich, I totally agree with you about the challenges, and they are so significant. But I think if there hadn't been those challenges, what would have been the purpose of this partnership, right? And
Right.
so, I mean, I think the frame of mind here, it really matters, right? Those challenges, the unanswered questions and the structural challenges that we face that create those issues, right? So, I mean, I really appreciate your point around being cautious on this, and I think that's really important. And right now, I don't know whether this collaboration will be able to address those issues at the very much at the structural level. I mean, I think I would very much like to see thinking around this, but this is also kind of a gradual process, right? Because each partner in this collaboration, we have our own realities. We have our own characteristics, right? So earlier on, both Larry and Rebecca mentioned about the Rotary and its long history and the type of peace work they've undertaken. And I'm kind of really thinking about this from a transformational perspective. I think the exciting thing about this collaboration is, I cannot speak on behalf of Rotary, but I want to see this partnership transforming the Carter School and making the Carter School better in what we do, right? Yep. So otherwise, the partnership doesn't mean much, right? It's only a kind of a technocratic exercise, right? You sort of come together, do something. But I think this whole philosophy behind, what we do, the motivations, like what really drives Carter School, I want to see in the next 5 to 10 years through this partnership, the Carter School becoming a lot more effective, reaching out to our constituencies and undertaking our practice, many benefits like that, so that our impact would be greater, right? So I think that is the way I'm approaching this. This is not really kind of like a point of we want to just change the world and it's going to be easy, and even changing ourselves, as we know, is hard, right? So I think that should be the starting point. I want to kind of see what we can change here at the Carter School so that we can be more effective. And I hope that that was the question for Rotary, right? So this is the chemistry, this is the connection point. We are not perhaps able to change our DNAs, but evolution of changing in DNA is possible. So in time, I'm sure we'll be able to do that too. So that's just like a 2 cents on that particular issue.
That's a really important point you make. I would add a little postscript. It's in a sense at a much lower level than the point you and Rich were making. But in terms of the mechanics of this, I see also a very important possibility, which is that Rotary has a pretty well-established system of funding activities. Often it's just a club that does it by itself, or they somehow network together, but they also have a system of grants. I think when David Fishman imagined this, he did not imagine this primarily as a way of accessing those grants. In other words, he didn't see this as one more Rotary grant funding mechanism, even though it might at some point include that. He did imagine that the entity would often be in a position to implement things that required funding beyond it or in addition to what Rotarians would themselves provide. And so he imagined that this group could seek funding from the US State Department to do something, from the USAID to do something, from corporate philanthropy to do things. And I believe he targeted those avenues in his mind as being more important sources of the financial resources than the normal funding of Rotary projects by Rotarians. So that, in a sense, throws back the question of, if Rotary is not being approached for its money, what's it being approached for in this? And that's how I found my way to this notion that it somehow has to do with the social capital that Rotary represents and the networks that it's involved in. So how to somehow actively and forcefully energize those things so that we take full advantage of them and help them in turn coalesce around larger undertakings that they might have been reluctant to or unable to undertake without the support. And it's the way why I see Charles's job and the rest of us helping Charles as being such an important piece of this, because something's got to act as either the facilitation or the hub for these things coming together. It won't work for us to cook up things and then ask Rotarians to do it. That's not what I'm suggesting. But when people are trying to move the next step, they need to know there's somebody there to help them move the next step. And I think it's something that this partnership really, in its best form, has the potential to be, in terms of both the implementation, the thought process, and the resourcing of the things that people are hoping to do. I wonder if others on the panel or in the listening in have thoughts about that.
Larry, my thoughts kind of in between where Alp and Rich were and yours. An example from the Political Leadership Academy. I had two individuals in the last cohort who came to me and said, this program has helped me recognize something about my present situation that I didn't recognize before I came in. I said, what's that? And they said, we're in the majority. And I said, what do you mean by that? And she said, those of us who want peace within my organization, we're in the majority, but the minority are the loudest, and they make it feel like that the majority of people are the ones who are yelling. And it was about partisan politics. I think it was like a town council or something like that. And she said, but the challenge is the loud ones make it feel like they're the majority. They make it feel like the system that we're working in. And those of us who are in the majority don't have the confidence or the voice to go forward because we don't know how. But she said the PLA has equipped me to be able to make these statements. And all of a sudden I recognized when I took those skills back to my town council that I was in the majority and we have changed the atmosphere of what we're doing. And I was like, well, that's amazing. So when we were talking about, like, what does this mean for the Rotary Club? I think when we address existing systems, existing structures around the world, that we can't forget that the second pillar of all of this is education. And while we might not be able to build peace in every instance of conflict around the world, logistically, it would be technically possible to educate every Rotarian with the basics of peace building so that they might shift their own little environment. And when tiny environments and structures get shifted toward peace, larger and larger and larger systems start to change. So I do think that we need to remember that this is the second half of what we're doing toward ends that could actually be the key to true success.
Yeah, that's great. Other comments?
Yeah, I'll add one thing to what Charles just said, and going along with what you and Alp have mentioned, especially when Alp talked about people changing themselves. The question that we may have is not only how to fix a system that's producing violence, but also how to handle ourselves in a way that we can turn out to be peacemakers or entrepreneurial, as several people have said. So, I mean, that nexus between the system and the personality is really where the rubber meets the road when it comes to conflict analysis and resolution.
Mm.
And that's also a point at which I must say I'm really happy to be at the Carter School, because we have people here, and there are other people in our field also who understand something about the personal aspects of being involved in conflict and conflict resolution. And I think one place where we could be very useful to Rotary is in doing the kind of teaching and the kind of work together that's represented by a colleague of mine like Mark Gopin, where Mark has written about books about what makes a peacemaker a peacemaker. What do you have to go through personally when what's the process by which you find yourself confronted by a conflict that looks intractable, and you also by a situation in which you're being asked to choose sides because you're a member of this group or that group. You're supposed to be on this side or that side. You're not even supposed to think about the conflict or what's causing the conflict. How does the personal change take place in which people feel more competent to think about conflict in a more complicated way, a more objective way, and then try to ready themselves to do something about it? Well, we do know a little something about that. Again, it's at the beginning of learning, not at the end of learning, but we know something about it. Charles knows something about it because he went to Africa and did this stuff himself in the Congo. And Mark, by the way, I'll plug Mark's new book. Mark Gopin's new book is called Compassionate Reasoning, and it really lays a kind of psychological foundation for doing this kind of peacemaking work. So I think this is going to be great, very interesting, and great fun, and hopefully useful to work with Rotarians about on this question of how you change yourself to become a peace builder, a peacemaker. Yeah.
Rebecca, maybe I'll ask you to come in one more time on this, because I think that's a very exciting direction of thought and not entirely unrelated from the work you've been doing on the activators. But I'm wondering if one were trying to reach a larger swath of Rotarians with this and trying to really come in, at least in part, not exclusively around projects, but around yourself as it relates to all of this. Is there precedent in Rotary for things like that? And can you imagine a way forward on that?
Okay, great. I hope you can hear me and you don't hear the vacuum that is currently going above my head. I think it's really, I'm glad you asked me to come in because I actually have a lot of thoughts about this. I mean, I think that going back to our global moment, we're in an interesting time because places in which they could always say conflict happens over there are now in a situation where they're not so sure it could just happen over there. Maybe it could also happen here, or maybe it is happening here and I just wasn't looking at it. So I think that people are taking it to be more personal and have it affect them in new ways. That said, I think it's really important to make it mean something to Rotary members individually. That's like the hook, right? Why do you start caring about something? Because it means something to you. If we just talk about systems all day long and it has no application to someone's life, then they're not going to be motivated to do work with it. So I can give you a quick example. We had another small grant to put on a webinar on forgiveness and societal healing. It's not something I was planning to do, so I didn't do the best job at promoting it. So I was shocked, absolutely shocked when I saw 360 people had registered for this. And 150 people showed up. Because, and this was mostly in the US, but all over the globe. People, that was a hook for them. Either on a personal level, they wanted to learn how to forgive someone, or because they were really worried about what's happening in their community. So I think when we talk about the education or just the introduction of some of these themes, how does it relate to those people in their own personal lives, and why should they care? Which is basic, but still really important.
Well, listen, this is a conversation we could carry on for a very long time, and I would be happy to do that. I'm going to try to respect the fact that we said we'd end it at 1:30, but I think that's a beautiful tone to end it on. That somehow there's so much work to be done on this thing, and it goes all the way from the individual to the societal on this. But we've equipped ourselves, and I'm personally proud to be associated with it, with a new vehicle for trying to attack some of that. And I think David was right to see the promise in this. It's falls to the rest of us to try to deliver on that promise and make a vision into a legacy. But it's not for him, of course, it's for everybody we're trying to serve. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I hope you found it interesting, and it was certainly a step forward in terms of this partnership. Thank you all very, very much.